And welcome back to the Business Immigration Benchmark. I'm your host, Laura Blanaers. Today we have a special guest, my friend and mentor, Jeff Dybdahl, Senior Manager, Mobility, Strategy, and Operations at Amazon. We're chatting all things vendor management and cost containment, and we really dive deep. Jeff gives us a lot of interesting anecdotes, specific ways to improve programmatically. He is an empathetic leader who has seen a ton of cases. He's a U.S. immigration attorney veteran and now in the broader global mobility space, so has a tremendous amount of experience. And we are so excited to pick his brain over the next 45 minutes. So with that, we'll jump right in. Welcome, Jeff, to the Business Immigration Benchmark. I'm so excited to have you here today as a former mentor, longtime friend, and, really instrumental in my career. You'll have to indulge me for a moment here to thank you for all the training you gave me, the hours you put into this baby attorney 11 years ago. So publicly thanking you for all the time and effort you put in to teaching me everything I know today about U.S. immigration law, but also how to be a client manager and give white glove client service. That's all because of you, Jeff. So thank you for that. And thanks for being on the podcast today.
Oh, gosh. Thank you, Laura. Now I wish this was not on video because everyone's going to see how red I'm looking. But thank you. That's a lot. You were a superstar when we met and continue to be one. So it made it very easy to work with you. Looking forward to our chat today.
Yeah, so we're going to chat all things mobility vendors, cost containment. I hope we have enough time to cover it all. If not, we're definitely inviting you back for more conversations. But to introduce you just briefly, Jeff, you are the Senior Manager, Mobility, Strategy, and Operations. And I understand that means you're leading program strategy for relocation, assignments, short-term travel, mobility, tax, business expansions, and cross-border work. Can you dive and tell us what your day-to-day looks like and what you're doing for Amazon in that role?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So my team is part of the larger business mobility services team, which covers immigration and all the things you just mentioned. And we are very closely connected. As you know, I came up as an immigration attorney, and I've only recently been getting into these other aspects of mobility, but have found they're very, very similar. The content is a little bit different, but the customers are the same. And the customer stressors and challenges and needs are the same. It's been, I think, really helpful to have had that international experience in immigration, moving over to a wider mobility scoped role. Tons of learning, really fascinating areas to deal with, and intimately connected with the world of immigration too. And I think what's been really eye-opening in this role is learning how the customer thinks about what's happening. For them, it's one big event, right? Everything's happening. They don't think of it as, oh, this is my immigration thing I have to do, and this is the moving thing I have to do, and these are the tax things I have to do. For them, it's all part of the one big picture. And so having all of these teams together, I think, is really key to giving a nice holistic experience to our employees and who we think of as our customers without showing all the wires. So hopefully they feel like it's one team working together to get them from point A to point B and getting all the stuff done for them.
That's a great segue into talking about partnering with vendors, because you in this global mobility role are balancing a ton of different vendors, right? Immigration providers, tax advisors, reload companies. Am I missing anybody in this stuff?
Yeah, we've got vendors in immigration and relocation and business travel, tax. We've got quite a few different vendors who are key partners for us. There's one other partner, which is all the different governments that are out there.
Fair.
That's the third leg of this stool. But our vendors are our partners. They are part of the team. And it's important that we always think that way, right? It's not two sides of the house. It's the same. We have one joint customer, and we have to think that way as we're a joint team trying to deliver for that customer.
That's awesome and well said. With so many partnerships, how are you keeping track of all the service delivery models from the various vendors that are partnering with your team?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think just like for our vendor partners, for us internally, the most important assets we have are our time and our data. So that means we need highly efficient mechanisms to stay aligned and engage with our partners. And we need to have data going back and forth. It's both timely and accurate. When I think about our mechanisms to stay aligned with all of our vendors, the first is being kind of clear on what our goals and our minimum expectations are. We have those in the contracts already under our SLAs, so that's one way to make sure. And we try to make sure that our SLAs are similar or the same across all of our contracts. So that way, we're comparing apples to apples when we're working with our vendors. Secondly, I think what's key is the reporting. When I first joined, each of our vendors would report to us kind of on a monthly basis using their own formatting. It was usually a PowerPoint. It was kind of whatever they thought was interesting, and they were kind of trying to read our minds and figured out what did we want to know. Internally, we have one very specific format and system that we use. And so when I first came on board, the first thing we did was we started talking to our vendors, and they now use the exact same reporting format that we use. As far as time efficiency goes, it just relieves the mental load from us internally of having to reconfigure for every different vendor. When we read a report that's either generated by us or by our partners, we are able to get to the key information that we need super quickly. We don't have to readjust to a different look and feel of how the data is presented. We don't have to ask, well, what does this mean? We know already. So we really like having that to be able to compare apples to apples on a monthly basis as we track through. So that's been one of the big wins for us, is making sure that the way we talk and think and look at our information and our data and the health of our program is the exact same way that our vendors are doing it with us.
That's a good point. And it sounds like you had to train, the existing vendors how to translate their data into Amazon reporting language.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge, right? And I'm not going to say we're perfect at it or that we're all the way there yet, right?
Okay.
But when you do have different vendors, it is really key to be able to try to get it aligned as much as possible. Not everything will be possible. You can't compare apples to apples necessarily from like a business visa vendor to a relocation vendor,
Sure.
for example. There's differences, but there's a lot of things that are the same. Expected turnaround times and cycle times, expected contact management timelines, customer satisfaction, all of those things, they're the same across the board. And just making sure that you're doing it consistently with everybody is extremely helpful. I'd say train is a strong word because actually our vendors were excited. So that they didn't have to try to guess what we wanted anymore. We just told them.
True.
And they were very happy to have a format that could just stay consistent and month over month be using the same standard.
Very cool. So can you give us a rundown on what it looks like to onboard a vendor? I mean, that's how it sounds like you were describing what it looked like when you onboarded in the role and then working with vendors, creating some best practices. What does it look like when you onboard a new vendor? How are you explaining things to them? How are you getting on the same page? What does that process look like?
Yeah, it can be different depending on the vendor, but consistency is key. Again, objective measurement of success and being very clear about what those criteria are to define a healthy program is key. That starts with the contract. Honestly, if you do it right, you should have great SLAs worked in that are really the most important things that matter to your customers and to you as a team. So having those consistent SLAs, I think, is key. But the first thing that we're looking for, honestly, is the data. It's the single most important thing. It's how we judge ourselves. It's how we judge our vendors. It's how we understand the customer experience and what they're going through. And so ensuring that our new vendors have the ability to get us the data, collect the data, get the data to us quickly, accurately, reliably. It's the number one thing. And so that's where we focus from the very beginning, is making sure that we have those tight connections and we can get that data. One of the things we look for is globally consistent data. Uh, Working with vendors all around the world, we're in a lot of different countries, and so our vendors are also in a lot of different countries and have offices all over the place. It's so important that we're comparing apples to apples once again, that we're not getting one type of data from one office and another type of data or another format of data from another. Having it globally consistent, having it centralized is key for us to be able to run a program at this size
Right.
and this geographic scope.
Yeah. So that when you're seeing snapshots, you like know what you're seeing
Yes.
and can
Yeah.
understand it.
And where possible, we prefer to get the raw data. I know that probably sounds terrifying, but we want to be able to slice and dice it ourselves as well, right? I don't want to have to go back and ask our vendor to do this extra, like, can you tell me this? Can I dive into this? Can I dive into that? The trust is gained by just having it, and we can all look at it and slice it and dice it the way it's most important to us.
I'm glad you brought up trust because that was kind of the next topic of building or rebuilding trust with vendors. We know that things can go sideways in the global mobility space, whether it's USCIS or any government entity making an unexpected, erroneous decision, tax policies changes, or insert international crisis. How are you working with vendors to build that trust? It sounds like you said data. And then the second question is, or rebuild data, like when things have gone sideways, whether it's because of the vendor or not, how are you partnering with them in that trust space? Kind of open-ended question there.
Transparency and honesty, direct conversations where we're not looking to blame someone. As part of my research for this, I actually went out and looked at the Journal of Accountancy, which is not a magazine I read regularly. But they had some very interesting research that they had done on typical rates of human error, and it's anywhere from 1% to 5%. So anywhere where you have manual processes, whether it's us here internally or externally with our vendors, there's going to be mistakes, period. And hoping for perfection from human beings is a fruitless endeavor. And so we expect a certain amount, right? And so we're not looking to blame an individual for a mistake. We are looking to rapidly fix that mistake and then quickly root cause to see if there's a programmatic issue we need to look at. Was this a one-off issue, or is it something we really need to address more holistically? And if it's programmatic, the only trustworthy solution that we will ever be 100% aligned on, especially if it's very high priority to get it right, is automation. You can't just ask people to try harder or work harder or just do better or never make a mistake. That's not possible. That's a failure of management in my mind. If we don't give our folks the tools to lower that error rate, it's always going to be there, and you should expect it to be there. If something is important, if it's a priority, if it is a key part of the customer experience, you have to build tooling and automation to give your people what they need to succeed. Otherwise, it's just a frustrating endeavor for everybody. So for us, the way we build back the trust is, one, quickly be told that there's an issue, not waiting. Time does not make problems better, as a former manager of mine used to tell me. And then quickly identifying who owned it. And then don't soft sell me the solution. Don't say we're going to retrain everybody or we're going to ask everybody to reread the SOP. That is not a solution for human error. That just is more human error. It's just best intentions, as we say here.
Right.
What you need is a programmatic solution, be it the process, be it the tooling. Something has to go in there to fix it, and that's where we earn trust. And it's not always the vendor. It's sometimes us, and we don't think we're perfect. So I really, really love it when our vendor says, here's the problem, here's what we can do better, and here's how you can help us. I love helping. And I can't, we know that the folks at our vendors are super, super smart. It's why they're here. It's why we use them. So I know your guys are going to come up with great solutions for me too. We're not going to think of everything. And the more eyes you put on it, the better. So helping us see where we have gaps is always welcome. We're not the customer is always right when I'm the customer. I know I'm wrong. So I appreciate it when folks are just honest with me and very open and tell me, this could be better if you, the client, did this. and then we're happy to go look in to see if we can do it.
Yeah, I like that answer. So it's the quick identification of where the issue happened and communicating that, and then identifying what the programmatic fix is that the vendor is proposing. And then I really like that third layer that you brought up, which was then suggesting what the client side can then do also to support that programmatic fix.
Absolutely.
My question, when something does go sideways, you're expecting that quick notification. Would it be okay? I'm a vendor, so selfishly I'm asking this question. Would it be okay if the vendor says, I need a minute to think about that programmatic fix, and that this could be a complicated situation. There's a lot of moving pieces. Would you be okay with the vendor kind of giving some pause and some thought to that programmatic solution and not having that right away, like identifying the issue, but then saying, I need to take this offline and think about it a little bit before I propose a solution?
Of course. We have a mechanism for that. We have a mechanism for everything at Amazon, but we have something called a COE, which is a correction of errors.
Okay.
When the problem comes up, before we even start thinking about that, we just try to solve the immediate issue, right?
Sure.
We just swarm on the issue internally and externally. We put everything we can at it to solve it for that person. After that, though, we have to go through that debrief process, that postmortem. And if we think it's programmatic, it has to have a correction of errors. And that's a document that we have a format for, that we use internally, that we've shared with our vendors. And they'll do the same thing. And it asks them to ask all the questions you can to get down to that root cause, and then start working through what the long-term solution is. So take time, of course. We want to solve it. We don't want to slap together another fallible solution because we're moving too quickly.
Good point. Shifting into a little bit about aligning with your vendor, I want to ask you a little bit about, how are you setting your team's goals, and how does your vendors play a part in that? Like, how are you communicating those strategic goals in your role that you're responsible for? And how are you, ensuring the partnership is on track to achieve them?
Great question. We have a couple of ways that our kind of big goals can come about. There's the regular on-cycle way that we do it, which is operational planning. As an example, we've started now planning for what we want to do in 2025. We're already starting to go through what we hope to achieve. It's ideation and kind of North Star visioning right now. We're not at that, like, lining things up with solid metrics. That'll happen later in the year. But we're already starting to work through what we'd like to achieve this year, and does it align with our long-term kind of 3-year North Star vision? We share that vision with our partners. A lot of the things that we're trying to fix, we just can't fix alone. The things that we're trying to achieve, it takes the whole team, and our vendor partners are part of that team. And so, for instance, we can't solve something with an API of data if our vendor doesn't have the ability to quickly set up that API. And so there's a lot of things that we know we will need, and we'll need to work with our partners on achieving great customer satisfaction scores. That's not something we can do by ourselves, right? So we try to get really early involve our partner teams in what we're trying to do, what we're trying to ideate on. And we take advantage of 2 meetings that we schedule throughout the year, twice a year, with our vendors to really step back and dig deep on the program, not just kind of that monthly business review, but an actual look at the big challenges and big ideas. And we work together on those throughout the course of this year as we plan for next year. And then when we do have everything solidly locked in, we just share it all with our vendors. We say, this is the goal we're trying to achieve. How can you help us get there? And then work together to try to get to that point.
Excellent. Kind of changing gears here, but on the theme of transparency and partnership, can you share some anecdotes or a story of when you've worked with a vendor to find a way through a difficult issue? And, what stands out to you when a vendor works through a mistake they have made? So kind of a 2-part story question.
Sure. First off, I want to say, we know your job is hard. Many, if not most of us internally, used to work on the vendor side of the house. We know it's tough. We know this work is complicated. We know that our customers are nervous and stressed and they're going through something really hard at home. And so we get it. It's a tough thing to do. It's really important, and it has a huge impact on people's lives on a day-to-day basis. Things are going to go wrong, though. It always happens. And what we appreciate the most is when I don't have to discover it and then come to you. I really appreciate that proactive outreach. Proactive outreach to identify the problem. If you already have a solution in mind, tell me, or if you need 24 hours, 1 week, depending on the urgency,
Sure.
and to start working through it together. I'll give you an example. We did have a vendor who we were really struggling with their customer satisfaction scores. They were underperforming, and so we were very honest and transparent with it. We said, we had defined good as this number, and you're here. What can we do? And they really took it to heart, to be honest with you. They started adopting more proactive problem solving, whereas before it had been a little bit reactive, waiting
Sure.
for us to call things out. And we said, we are pro experiment. You want to try something that no other client has ever done because you think it'll work? Give it a shot with us. We'll happily partner with you to try new things. We're not worried about being average or trying something that's never been done before. So come to us with your crazy ideas and we'll see. Let's try it and we'll run it through. So for this one, they assigned a program manager to this thing, which immediately earned my trust. I started getting reports every 2 weeks on the status. It was immediately raised up to the senior client engagement partner who talked with us and was part of those regular email reportings to see how we were doing. We went through all the data that we could pull on what the customers felt like was lacking. Part of it was on us, I'll be honest. There were things that we could have been doing better and we weren't. We took that as an opportunity. So together, we ended up changing a lot of things. And I'm happy to say 6 months later, they were killing it. They were nailing the SLA that we had, and it's been going quite smoothly since then. And we still have that reporting. Every once in a while, we'll see a dip, but now we see it so quick. The way we do the reporting, the way they share with us, and they never hide the ball. They tell us right away, we messed up, we did X, or y'all messed up. You could do this better. And we appreciate it.
Yeah, it sounds like, and in my experience, sometimes the difficult conversation that you're really nervous to have, the difficult feedback leads to opportunity. And that's a great story to share that it led to not only some new creative solutions, but ultimately a better partnership. Kind of like with any relationship management, you can be nervous to give feedback, but that ultimately can lead to some good things.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, we're going to shift gears into cost containment. So this is a topic, and quite frankly, I think the most relevant topic in 2024 and, potentially 2025. All the clients, contacts that I have are really concerned with reining in costs and that it is a commonly expressed pain point. So I'm wondering, can you tell us whether this is a pain point on your team that you're wrestling with, and how are you handling your general approach to cost containment if it is an issue you're wrestling with?
Sure. Of course, it's an issue for us. It's an issue for everybody. And it's not just now. It's always something that we're judged on. We're expected to get more efficient every year with our resources, good year, bad year, economically. And that's part of the goal that we're working towards at all times. There's a lot that can be done as far as policy decisions on how and when and how much to support international moves or immigration or what have you. But on the service delivery side, there's usually a lot of efficiencies that you can find. And one of the most valuable lessons I've learned is the very first step is always simplification. It is amazing over the course of a couple of years how much complexity can just grow naturally into your program. Because with all good intentions, you tried to solve X problem, so you kind of tacked on this bit, and then there was this one, and so you tacked on a little bit, and before you know it, you've got this Frankenstein monster. And you can't fix that with more automation. You've created something that's almost impossible to work through, And if you want automation, you need to get the process and the program simplified, because it's easier to build a simple machine than a full-on AI self-powered robot, right?
Yeah.
So at Amazon, as we think through the automation and the technology, we'd much rather fix it with a stapler than a self-driving car, if that'll fix it. And so if you can simplify your process, it's one of the things I've learned the most from our tech leaders is when I go to them with my problem, they ask, have you simplified everything as far as you possibly can? And usually my answer is, I have not. I'll go do that and I'll come back. And then the next thing that I think is the most important is start talking to your tech team early, way earlier than you think you should. They should be your partners all day, every day, honestly. Tell them your pain points, tell them your hopes and dreams, tell them your goals, and let them help you design it. I think one of the errors I have often made is trying to tell our tech partners what they should build or what they need to build, rather than just tell them my problem and have them help me figure out what the solution would be. That's been a complete switch for me now. And I used to spend a lot of time writing up a huge paper on everything that I needed and what my dream was before talking to my tech partners, only to find out that they were, some team was already building a thing that I could have used and I didn't have to write that huge paper. So bringing them in, involving them super, super early, way before you might think you should, is really helpful. They are, again, a huge part of our team. And they're not a separate part. It's not those tech folks and then us, subject matter folks. It's all of us.
The image that came to my mind when you were describing that was almost like the simplify the process is like clearing the cobwebs, right? You've created these complicated processes, at various different times. It was all great until you realize, got to clear it out, simplify. I really like that. That's what came to my mind. You mentioned, Jeff, to focus on programmatic fixes for addressing errors, but it also sounds like programmatic fixes could also be an opportunity for tech innovation or leveraging tech for cost savings. Amazon being a leader in the field, surely you guys are leveraging those folks like you were just mentioning. Are there any, overall tech innovations you recommend for programs, whether it's something you've done or that you just see as an easy, low-hanging fruit for other companies to use for cost savings, leveraging tech, simplifying the process?
Yeah, one thing, when I first joined this team a couple of years ago, we held some listening sessions with some of our employee customers. And the refrain that was repeated over and over and over again to us was, there's too many points of contact. There's too many teams to remember. I have to remember this password and login for this one vendor website and a different one for this other vendor website. I've got, in my web browser, I've got all these folders saved just to handle all the different stuff. And I've got email folders set up to control all the emails that are coming through. I think it's a problem for everybody, to be honest with you, and that's not unique to us. But I mean, in addition to all these well-meaning outside vendors, there's all these well-meaning inside teams that are also reaching out. We had one person who signed an internal transfer agreement, and within 24 hours, he had over 40 emails in his inbox from different folks reaching out to help him, with all best intentions, to help him get through that process. And he just struggled to figure out, what do I start with? What's the number one priority? Do I need to do one thing before another one? Will it fail if I do it out of order? That was a huge one. What we've been trying really hard to do, and we're not done, we're not all there yet though, is centralize as much of that as possible within our own system. Some of our vendors are also working on this transparently. And I think there's some really great solutions going on out there and some really great thought processes. But trying to just make sure that our employees can find what they need in one spot. If nothing else, at least a guideline of the steps.
Right.
And here are the links to our vendor platforms for you to go to. Providing something, just providing direction and guidance. This is a really uniquely stressful situation for our customers. They are picking up themselves and their families and going somewhere. It's very challenging. It's tough. then they're trying to do their work every day, probably a new job, which is super stressful, and then come home and it's the dinner table conversation, right? What we do, people are talking about at home over dinner.
Yeah.
And so it's really key to make sure that we're getting that right for them and reducing their level of effort and their mental load as much as we can. And so one of the things we're really trying to focus on is, can we centralize things and give people kind of one place to go and find everything and helpful guidance? And it's not even super complicated, really. I mean, it can be as simple as just a nice checklist in order of what to do and where to go find that instead of asking them to remember it all themselves.
Yeah, totally. And then with that, what creative solutions have you considered or you're considering or think other companies may want to consider when tackling cost containment for their immigration and global mobility programs? So we've definitely focused on simplicity, leveraging tech where it makes sense after the process has been simplified, sort of big picture. Are there any other outside of the box solutions you think programs can consider for, approaching cost containment?
It's tough, right? Because cost is and always will be important. But so is making sure that you're delivering a great experience, right? You can't back off the experience just because it's a little tougher. And you want to make sure we've also got a duty of care
Good point.
for our customers, right? They're going through, in many cases, a legal process that's really complicated. And if you're talking about U.S. immigration, it's just a labyrinth of things for them to get through. So you can't sacrifice experience for cost. There are ways to optimize for both, though, rather than, for example, having all those customers come to us to find out what they need to do next and where to go. We made it available as self-service. That's a thing for Amazon. We're expected to handle our own problems, and so self-service is the model. So maybe it's a little bit easier for us internally because that's what our folks expect. They don't expect necessarily white glove hand holding all the time. In fact, we hire people who like to solve their own problems, right? There's a real kind of techie hacker mentality, and folks want to figure stuff out.
Right.
And the more they feel like they're in control, the better, honestly. So giving them the information and being transparent with where things are and how to get things done is actually often a good way to save money and improve the experience.
Yeah, like build out that self-service resource center so that you're not being tapped or tapping vendors who may have an hourly rate on things, which, you may have that model, you may not, depending on our listeners here. But yeah, that's a good point that if you build out a self-service model, that can alleviate some of the hours spent just describing the process if you've got good resource documents for folks to access. And then they know how to access them, of course.
Yeah. And if you can get your teams out of responding to the same question over and over and over so that they can think about those programmatic experiences, that's a much more efficient use of your own internal resources and cost as well. So we try to identify anywhere where you're answering the same thing over and over and find a way to make that either solve it or make it a self-service thing that you can just provide that answer without the need to contact us necessarily for something that's relatively simple that someone could serve themselves.
Yeah. I think most people like it, and it's kind of the model that a lot of our banks are on and a lot of the other services we use daily, like there are those resources. So people are, inherently trained these days to seek it out. The other thing you were mentioning that I want to dig just a little deeper on is the tension between, employee experience or client experience or end user experience and cost containment. And that a lot of times these things are phrased or structured kind of against each other, right? That it's you can have one, but you're going to pay for it. Or if you cut costs, it's going to be at the expense of the employee experience. Can you tell me that when, someone's considering policy changes, whether it's to enhance the employee benefits or to, add more cost containment measures, what do you recommend our HR global mobility leaders do when reviewing policies that, sort of hold these two tensions? And how frequently should folks be looking at updating policies that impact costs and employee experience?
That's a great question. In an organized, cadenced way, at least annually, at a very minimum, reviewing your policies and your decisions. Then in an ad hoc, off-cycle way, as problems come up, you have to go back as part of the root cause analysis and deep diving the issue. You have to go back and ask, did I make this myself? Did I create this problem because of my policies?
Yeah.
So that's another way to look at it. And then you will have to balance sometimes. But our leadership here doesn't think of it as an either or normally. As long as the solution is the right one, which is often trying to automate things. If you can make that process simple for your team, it's less resources spent on doing that thing. And it's often better for the end user as well. If you can simplify it, provide that just-in-time information that your customers need, and allow them to self-service it whenever they need it, you're going to have great wins, and you're going to get both great customer service and cost efficiencies. But you really do have to spend the time and give your teams the time to think big and programmatically and not just be trying to manage individual cases all the time. So you do need to resolve those, but drive quickly to programmatic solves so that you can move past getting bogged down in everyday individual casework, and you can really think about designing a program that functions better.
Man, what a great optimistic and hopeful answer. I love that, Jeff. Thank you for that. This one, Jeff and I did not prepare for. So this is going to be kind of fast and fun, hopefully, Jeff. So this is a couple hypotheticals, not legal law school hypotheticals. We won't be asking you to give legal advice here, but these are, yeah, exactly. These are some pain points, some issues that we've had flagged from our listeners, and that we've anonymized the data or the question to not reveal any confidential information here, but we want to get your approach or your take on these problems that our listeners are dealing with. So are you down to hang with me and see what we got here?
Is this the lightning round?
This is the lightning round. That's exactly right.
All right,
so we
let's
just want to hear Jeff's take. Okay, so scenario one, we've got an immigration manager who's struggling with responsiveness and reliability of their current immigration and mobility vendor. The vendor's delays and errors have caused several cases to slip, leading to frustration among hiring managers and company leadership. Jeff, how would you advise this immigration manager to assess the partnership with their vendor and ensure accountability and improvements? How would you advise this team, if you would, prepare to go to market with an RFP? What you got?
I would always be hesitant to lead a punitive RFP. That doesn't seem like a healthy way to run your business. I think the first thing to do, and I'll tell you one that I've actually done. We had an individual caseworker who was working on individual things, had messed up twice, and I'll be honest, that person felt really bad. You know, they knew 99.9% of people are trying really hard, and so I got on the phone with the caseworker. I wanted to make sure that this caseworker heard that we have the same customer and that caseworker's problems are my problems. And ultimately, when things go sideways and that vice president is upset, they're looking at this face. They're not looking at our vendors' faces, right? So I have to own it and I have to solve it, and I'm going to. And I also understand what human error is, and I also understand how hard this work is. I also drive home the part about how impactful it is. I think it's easy when you're on your 100th H-1B of the month to forget sometimes what a big deal this is. And even the smallest errors can lead to a lack of trust from your customer. And so I had that conversation, but then programmatically, we had to then go in and ask, did we give this person the tools they needed to be successful? Did we set them up for success programmatically? Did we give them the right process? Did we give them the right tooling? Did we give them the right 4-eye check? 2 people check. Or was this just normal human error? If it's not, and sometimes it's not, you just have to be very transparent and say, this is the benchmark. This is the standard for what good looks like, and you're not there. What can we do? How can we support you? And that's whether it's the whole vendor or single case managers. And then honestly, work through it. We have put full programs on performance improvement programs before, and set up, these are the goals we need to achieve by X in order to get this right. Then if you're not achieving it, of course, you should look at the market. But honestly, our theory is you should be checking the market fairly regularly as a matter of good health, not such that you're running out at the last minute because you have a horrible problem that you can't solve with a vendor. That should be your last resort.
Wow, great answer. So many gems. But what I really heard, Jeff, is how you lead with empathy, and that's amazing. So really inspirational, as always. Lightning round 2 here. Well, this one should be good. A senior mobility manager is responsible for overseeing the corporate mobility program and must find ways to optimize the budget. The company is experiencing rapid growth, putting additional strain on the mobility budget. What strategies would you suggest to the senior mobility manager to effectively manage the mobility program budget during a period of rapid growth? So kind of do more with less. What do you suggest they do?
Well, first, make sure that they feel like they've got the ownership over it, right? Make sure that they're seeing that budget regularly, whether that's on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. Understand what it is that you need to hit, and then be reporting on it generally. If you don't report on it, you don't fix it. Invisible problems never get solved. You have to have it at the front of your mind all the time, and that's by having regular reviews of whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Second is simplify. Remove bureaucracy, remove levels of approval required. Let folks experiment and try to go faster. Give your vendors, within a certain range, here's what you can do and approve without even needing to ask me. Make it easier and faster for everybody, and reduce all those layers of bureaucratic red tape and approvals that are required, and that saves everybody time. Usually the customer gets a way better experience, and the program can run faster and smoother, usually at a lower cost.
Wow, Jeff, I love getting to pick your brain, and it's a treat to continue to learn from you. So, wow, thanks for your gems of advice. And I'm continually inspired by your empathy and the way you approach problems and people and difficult conversations. Any closing remarks on the discussion? I think we tackled most of it, but I'm going to have you on again to talk about something else because I learned so much. And I think our listeners do too.
Thanks, Laura. This was super fun, by the way. Thank you. Honestly, doing things like this, I think, whether you're on the vendor side or internally, this is a good thing to do, is pause and think big for a minute. Give yourself that room for your brain to look out at the horizon and not just at your computer screen at that next thing you have to do. This was great for me, I'll be honest with you. Some of the questions that you asked me really got my brain going. And so giving yourself time every once in a while to have a conversation like this, I think, is super key to re-inspiring you and kind of re-energizing you. That's what it's done for me today. So thank you.
Wow. Well, and a great plug. So if you're an HR Global Mobility listener, ping me on LinkedIn. We'd love to chat, give you the chance to pause and reflect, like Jeff said, and let me pick your brain on what's going on with your program or how you're handling the issues of the day. Jeff, thanks so much. This was an absolute pleasure to reconnect and chat with you.
Thanks, Laura. Great catching up. Thank you for having me on. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Absolutely.